Dad said. "You're not welcome at your sister's wedding, you'll embarrass us." So I sent a gift. When they opened it and saw what was inside, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I wasn't surprised when the wedding invitation didn't arrive. Disappointed? Sure. But surprised? No. Because deep down, I knew this day was coming. It had been building up for years, like a storm just beyond the horizon. And then, it broke with 6 words from my father that hit harder than anything he'd ever said to me. "You'll embarrass us at the wedding." Not, "We think it's best." Not, "It's complicated." Just that. Cold, clipped, and direct. Like I was some kind of disease they didn't want infecting their perfect little social affair. My sister, Madison, had always been the only one who treated me like family after I walked away from their world. Even when I dropped out of law school during my breakdown. Even when I spent a year couch surfing and trying to stay sober. She was the one who sent texts on my birthday. Who showed up at my rehab graduation. Who hugged me like she meant it. So when she called me a month before her wedding, voice trembling, I already knew what she was going to say. "Dad thinks it's best if you don't come," she whispered, barely audible over the hum of her car. "He says it's too risky, that you might, that it's not the right crowd." I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. Because if I spoke, I would have broken. Not out of anger. Just heartbreak. "I wanted you there," she added quickly. "But I'm sorry, okay?" That was it. No invitation. No brother of the bride toast. No dance. Just a carefully constructed guest list and a note from my father that I wasn't part of their image anymore. And I'll admit it, for a few days, I debated going anyway. Crashing the ceremony. Making a scene. But I didn't. Instead, I sent a gift. A beautiful, wrapped box delivered straight to the reception hall, scheduled to arrive just before the cake cutting. Inside was something no one expected. Something that had been buried for years, collecting dust in my old apartment closet. Something that was going to change everything. The gift box was wrapped in white and gold, tied with an ivory ribbon that Madison would instantly recognize as her favorite color combo. I knew the moment it hit the reception hall, it would be mistaken for something expensive, perhaps designer china or a custom engraved keepsake. But inside? Inside was the one thing our father never expected to see in public, the family album from my mother's attic. Not the edited version that sat in the living room. Not the one that told the story of our polished, picture-perfect family with golf club picnics and vacation homes. No. This was the raw one, the one our real mother, not Dad's second wife, had kept hidden until her passing. I'd spent weeks sorting through it after she died. And the more I turned its pages, the more I saw the truth she'd quietly protected. There were photos, dozens, that told stories he never wanted told. My father, David Harper, smiling a little too closely with his then-secretary in a hotel lounge in Chicago. A receipt tucked into one of the pages, billed to a room with 2 guests. Handwritten notes in Mom's familiar script. March 3rd, he said he was in Denver. But it wasn't just the affair. There were scans of bank records. Transfers from a joint family trust into offshore accounts. I had verified them with a friend in finance. There were letters from his old partner, Owen, begging for clarification after the sudden dissolution of their joint firm. And one that chilled me. "David, this isn't just betrayal, it's theft. I'm giving you a chance to make this right." Dated 6 months before Owen's stroke. For years, I thought our father's occasional stress and distant moods were just the toll of business. Now I realized they were the side effects of keeping skeletons crammed in a walk-in closet. I slipped all of this, copies of the most damning pieces, into the photo album. Carefully labeled. Nicely preserved. The kind of thing that would look like a thoughtful memory book to anyone watching from across the ballroom. I added a card. For Madison. May your marriage always be built on truth. Then I sealed the box. The wedding was set in upstate New York, at a vineyard estate with white columns, string quartets, and champagne fountains, exactly the kind of stage my father loved. Every detail was curated for photos. For prestige. For the illusion. He always said, "Reputation is everything." I used to think he meant it in a philosophical way. But as I got older, I understood he meant his reputation. Not mine. Not Madison's. Just his. He built our family image like a CEO branding a company. And I was the product that didn't fit the line. When I chose art school over business, when I got hospitalized for depression at 21, when I refused to make something of myself, the way he envisioned, I became the weak link. He used to call me Harper's Flaw when he thought I wasn't listening. So when he told Madison to cut me out of her wedding, it wasn't about me causing a scene. It was about him being afraid that someone might see past the polish. That someone might ask why the eldest Harper child wasn't present. That someone might dig deeper. But what he didn't realize was that I'd already started digging. I wasn't out for revenge, not really. But after years of being told I was the embarrassment, the liability, I wanted the truth to breathe. Even if it came gasping through the shock of a wedding reception. My gift was scheduled to arrive during the reception dinner, hand-delivered. I'd paid extra for that. It would be opened with all the other presents while the guests laughed, clinked glasses, and danced under fairy lights. And my father? He would be standing right there, smiling for the cameras. Until the lid came off. I wasn't there to see it happen, but I've heard the story enough times now to picture every second. Dinner had just wrapped up. Madison was glowing, nervous but happy, according to a friend who was there. Kevin, her new husband, gave a toast about fresh starts and honesty, which in hindsight might be the most ironic part of the whole night. The music was soft, the wine was flowing, and the gift table gleamed under the string lights. That's when the white and gold box was brought forward. My cousin Kate, the unofficial MC of the evening, picked it up and read the tag. "From your brother," she announced with a smile, holding it up for everyone to see. Madison blinked. She hadn't told anyone I wasn't invited. To most of the guests, I was just the mysterious older brother who lived out west. Someone asked, "Is he here?" Madison shook her head quietly, her fingers already tugging at the ribbon. The room settled. Some curious glances. A few whispered guesses. She opened the box slowly, expecting something sentimental. Her fingers found the photo album first, leather-bound, heavy, familiar. She opened it. The first page held a picture of the two of us as kids, riding bikes in our grandparents' driveway. A small note beneath it in my handwriting. The beginning. Then she turned the page. That's when things changed. A black and white photo of our father in that Chicago hotel lobby. Another page, the receipt. Then the letter from Owen. Then the bank transfers. Her smile vanished. A friend said Madison's fingers went still halfway through flipping a page, her face frozen like someone had just whispered something terrifying in her ear. Kevin leaned in, confused. Her maid of honor stood behind her, whispering, "What is that?" And then Madison stood up. No warning. No words. Just stood, clutching the album, eyes locked on our father. He had been mid-conversation with the mayor's wife when she dropped it onto the table in front of him. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said, loud enough for the entire head table to hear, "Did you think I'd never find out?" The room went dead quiet. Someone dropped a fork. A child started crying somewhere near the dessert table. And my father, he did what he always did when control slipped through his fingers. He tried to pretend it wasn't happening. "What is this?" he said calmly, though I'm told his hands were shaking. He reached for the album like it might disappear if he just closed it fast enough. But Madison wouldn't let him touch it. "No," she said, her voice steady. "Read it." Kevin was standing now too, leaning in over her shoulder, flipping through the pages as his jaw tightened. When he got to the bank transfers, he looked up and said, "David, is this real?" My father straightened his cufflinks. "It's nonsense. Clearly fabricated." He didn't even try to be subtle. Didn't look at Madison. Didn't acknowledge the photos or the receipts or the letters. Just denied everything like a politician caught mid-scandal. But Madison was already a step ahead. She pulled a second envelope from the bottom of the box, a copy of Mom's handwritten will. Not the version Dad kept framed in his study. The real one. The one that mentioned the house he sold behind my back. The one that called him out for mishandling family funds. How long? She asked. How long have you been lying to all of us? That's when the murmurs started. Guests leaning in. Phone screens lighting up. Whispers spreading like brush fire. I heard later that one of his old law partners stood up and quietly left the room. Another whispered, I told you something didn't add up. My father finally realized he'd lost the room. His charm, the currency he'd spent his life trading in, was bankrupt now. He slammed the album shut. This is a wedding, he barked. Not a courtroom. But it was too late. Because weddings, for all their sparkle and speeches, are about truth. About starting something real. And in that moment, nothing felt more real than what Madison did next. She looked him dead in the eye and said, Then maybe you don't belong here either. I was sitting alone in my apartment when the first call came in. I didn't even check the caller ID, I just let it go to voicemail. Then the second came. Then a third. By the time I got up to make coffee, my phone was buzzing so often it practically danced across the countertop. At first, I ignored them all. I figured it was Madison, maybe Kevin. Or worse, my father, trying to do damage control. But curiosity won out when I saw a text from Aunt Leslie. I always wondered. You were right to send it. That was the first crack in the wall. Then came a voicemail from my cousin Ben, voice low, shaky. Hey man. I saw what you sent. I didn't know. None of us did. I'm sorry. An hour later, I picked up a call. It was my Uncle Mark. Your father's losing his mind, he said, with something between awe and disbelief. He tried to say the album was fake. That you doctored it. But then Kevin stood up and read that letter from Owen aloud. Whole room heard it. I stayed quiet, unsure how to respond. He's trying to talk your sister out of it. Uncle Mark continued. Out of believing you. But she won't even look at him. She walked out, gift in hand. Said she needed air. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the counter. Relief? Regret? I couldn't tell which was stronger. Mark added more gently. You did what you had to do. Someone needed to. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just about me anymore. Or even Madison. This was about all the people Dad had manipulated, dismissed, outmaneuvered over the years. People who had always suspected something but were too afraid, or too isolated, to speak. Now they had proof. And I'd given it to them. I turned off my phone. Not because I wanted to escape, but because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't need validation. I knew what I had done. And I knew why I'd done it. The next day felt like walking through the ruins of something once mighty. I didn't hear from Madison until the afternoon. She texted simply, Can I call you? When the phone rang, there was a long silence on the line before she finally spoke. Was it always this bad? She asked. Her voice was tight, raw. Like someone trying to talk while holding back a dam that had been ready to burst for years. I didn't answer right away. Because how do you explain to someone that the man they looked up to, the one who tucked them in and paid for their first car, was also the same man who stole your future and called you broken behind closed doors? Worse, I said. You just didn't see it. He never needed to hide it from me. She sighed, shaky. I feel so stupid. No, I said quickly. You were surviving. We all were. Then she asked the question I wasn't ready for. Why didn't you come? I had to sit down. That one knocked the air out of me. Because I didn't want to ruin your day, I said honestly. But I also didn't want to be erased. I heard her breath hitch. You weren't, she whispered. Not anymore. She told me she had left the reception after confronting Dad. That she and Kevin drove around aimlessly for hours, the album still in her lap. She said she cried, not just for the lies, but for what it meant, how much of her life had been built on a story someone else had written. I believed him, she said. I believed he was the hero of this family. We sat in silence for a while. Two siblings who had finally, painfully, found themselves standing on the same side of the truth. "I'm sorry," she said, "for listening to him. For pushing you away." I wanted to say something poetic. Something healing. But all I could say was, "Thank you." And in that quiet moment, I realized the real gift I'd sent wasn't the album. It was the truth. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It was more like a slow unraveling. Over the next few days, the Harper name, once whispered with admiration in the business circles of our town, became something else entirely. Rumors turned to murmurs. Murmurs turned to questions. And then the questions turned into investigations. Apparently, Owen's widow, yes, the same Owen who had written that desperate letter, had never stopped looking for answers. She'd suspected for years that my father siphoned off the firm's assets before dissolving their partnership. But without proof, there was nothing she could do. Until now. She got her hands on the album. I don't know how, maybe Madison reached out. Maybe Kevin. But once she had it, the gloves came off. She took the evidence to a lawyer, and suddenly, my father's careful empire of connections and curated silence began to crumble. I watched it all unfold from a distance. Headlines. Anonymous tips. Old colleagues stepping forward, emboldened by someone finally breaking the spell. But here's the thing no one talks about. When a storm like that hits, it doesn't just knock down the man at the center of it. It shakes everyone tethered to him. Including Madison. She called again a week later. This time, she sounded steadier. Not okay, exactly, but no longer suspended in that free-fall panic of betrayal. She told me she and Kevin had postponed their honeymoon. Not out of shame or embarrassment. Just space. Time to process what the wedding had turned into. She also said something else I didn't expect. "People keep asking why you did it. Why you picked my day to drop a bomb." I winced. "And what did you say?" "I told them the truth," she replied. "That if there was ever a day to stop pretending, it was the one built entirely on love and honesty." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. I thought about how close I came to not sending anything. About how, if I had stayed quiet one more time, nothing would have changed. Not for her. Not for me. Not for anyone. "Do you think he'll recover from this?" she asked after a while. "No," I said. "But he'll try to rebuild. Men like him always do." There was a pause, and then she said something that surprised me more than anything else. "I'm glad it came from you. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the success story. But in the end, I had done what no one else in our family dared to do, pulled the curtain back. And somehow, that mattered more than the seating chart or the wedding photos or the speech I never gave. That night, I sat in my apartment and looked through my own copy of the album. The original. The one Mom kept safe all those years. I thought about her, how quietly she'd carried the weight of that truth. How she'd probably known I'd be the only one who'd understand what to do with it. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not revenge. Not pride. Just peace. Because the truth was finally out. And sometimes that's enough. 3 weeks passed. The calls had mostly stopped. The dust had begun to settle, but the landscape was different now. My father's firm issued a vague statement about internal restructuring. A few of his most loyal allies cut ties quietly, distancing themselves with carefully worded emails and sudden unavailability. One of his charity boards released him from his position to preserve public confidence. Behind the polite language, the message was clear: you've been exposed. As for my father, he hadn't reached out. Not once. Which, honestly, said more than any confrontation could have. He was never the type to apologize. Never the type to admit he'd lost. If silence was his last defense, I let him have it. But the silence didn't mean things were still. Madison invited me to the house she and Kevin had just moved into, a modest place, not the downtown condo our father offered to pay for last year. I stepped into their living room, half expecting the awkwardness to choke the air, but it didn't. Instead, she greeted me with a long hug. No words. Just the kind of embrace you give someone when you realize you haven't truly seen them in years. We sat on the couch, and she brought out the album. It looked heavier in her hands than it had in mine. Like it had gained weight from all it carried now. "I've looked through this a dozen times," she said, gently thumbing a corner of a page. "It still makes me sick. But it also makes me wonder, how many things did I ignore just to keep loving him?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I knew exactly what that felt like. You spend your whole life trying to love someone who's always giving you conditions. You learn to mold yourself into something more acceptable. Until one day, you don't recognize who you are without their approval. She looked at me, her eyes glassy. "You know what hurts most? Not that he lied, but that I believed him when he said you were the problem." That one cut deep. But I didn't cry. I'd cried enough over the years, for the boy I was, for the family I tried to belong to, for the countless dinners where my silence was mistaken for peace. But now, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had chosen a different path and finally helped someone else see the road for what it was. "I don't blame you," I told her. "He was the magician. I just saw the wires." She smiled, bittersweet. "Well, the show's over." And then, in the most unexpected twist of the entire year, she handed me something, a small envelope, light and crisp. Inside, a handwritten note. "For your gallery. The real kind of legacy. Love, M." And a check. Not from our father. Not some quiet bribe to patch over the scandal. But from Madison's own savings, her way of helping fund the art space I'd been dreaming about for years. I stared at her, stunned. "You don't have to do this." "I know," she said. "But I want to." It wasn't about the money. It was about what it symbolized. The first time someone in my family saw value in me without demanding I become someone else first. We stayed up late that night, talking not as broken branches from the same tree, but as two people finally free of its shadow. She told me about her childhood memories, the ones I didn't know she had. I told her about the night I almost didn't come home. We didn't fix everything, but we started telling the truth. And that, more than anything, was what I'd always wanted. When I left, the air felt cleaner. And I realized, sometimes the greatest revenge isn't exposure or disgrace. Sometimes it's healing. Living well. Loving deeply. And walking away, knowing that the truth finally spoke louder than the silence. Looking back, I didn't set out to blow up anyone's life. I didn't want drama or revenge. I just wanted to stop being the ghost at the edge of my own family. But sometimes the truth doesn't whisper. Sometimes it kicks the doors open and forces everyone to look. I lost the version of my family I used to chase, but I gained something better: clarity, self-respect, and a real connection with the one person who mattered most. Madison, if you're in a place like I was, ignored, erased, cast as the problem, here's what I'll tell you: speak your truth. Even if your voice shakes. Especially then. Because when the lies finally fall away, what's left is the only thing that matters. You.